All right. Hey, I'm Jocelyn Jean-Louis Hardrake, founder and executive director of Journey to Esquire. And this is part of our continuing legal education series. I'm so excited today. We're going to be talking to Janet Thompson Jackson about cultivating professional integrity and community for a thriving legal workplace. So just a little bit about Journey to Esquire. We create lawyers who lead, mentor, inspire one student at a time. And we do that through curated conversations just like this one, personalized preparation, and meaningful mentorship. And for more information on our programs, you can go to journeytoesquire.com. You can find out how you can join our community. We're looking for time, talent, and treasure, and that is how we support the future of the legal profession. So let's talk a little bit about our guest speaker today, Janet Thompson Jackson. She wears a lot of hats. She is the CEO of Well Law, which has created a Well Law app that I absolutely love. I love it so much that I purchased it for our students for the class of 2025, and I will be using it as well because, of course, I always want to have the full experience when I introduce students to something new. We had them using another app previously, and they got brought out by a bigger company, right? Which is cool, but I like when the apps take into consideration the unique challenges of law students and lawyers, and law does just that. She is also the Wellbeing, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer and Faculty of Law at the University of Groningen in Netherlands. And she's a Professor Emerita at Washburn University School of Law. And she's also a Wellbeing and Leadership Certified Coach. So Janet knows a lot about wellness and well-being. It is literally what she does for a living. So today we're going to be talking about how do we incorporate all this stuff about wellness into the legal workplace? And in this 50-minute CLE session, we're going to equip new and young lawyers in particular with essential skills to foster a culture of community in the legal profession. And we'll explore the importance of things like professionalism, being and outreach, and creating supportive and inclusive work environments. And you're going to learn practical strategies to promote diversity, engage with your community, maintain your own well-being while enhancing your professional competence. And we want this to be interactive. Jen and I will be making it more like a conversation. I'll be asking questions. She'll be giving real-world examples. And we want to make sure you have actionable insights to help you thrive in your early legal career. Because as we know, Janet and I have been lawyers for a long time. This is a very demanding profession, but it can also be very rewarding. And you don't have to sacrifice your well-being in order to do well in it. So young lawyers, we're talking to you, but anyone who hires young lawyers like state attorney's offices, PD's offices, law firms, right? You all are the first employers for a lot of these young and new lawyers. And so we want to make sure everyone is fostering these environments where new lawyers can thrive. And so this has already been approved by the Florida Bar for continuing legal education. And so make sure you look out for that course number so that you can get your credit. And our objective today is empower lawyers in their first decade of practice with a deep understanding of the critical role that professional integrity and community outreach play in creating a thriving legal workplace. And so I'm going to pass the mic over to Janet, let her talk a little bit about herself and her background, and then we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about today. Janet?
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here. I'm happy to be doing this today. And you gave, I think, a pretty good introduction to me. The one thing that I do want to add to that is how I went from being a professor, a law professor, to a focus on well-being. And I like to say that I actually was a pretty anxious law student. And even before that, my mother described me as a child as very serious-minded. So I think that I carried some anxiety and kind of the weight of something. I don't know if it was the weight of the world as a child, but the weight of something I was carrying on me. And I was very aware of that. And I always looked for ways just to bring the anxiety down a little bit. And so in this journey, I start teaching and I start having students come to me, and suddenly I see my old self mirrored back to me in my students. And I thought, oh, they just don't know how to manage all of this anxiety and stress, and they are just carrying it. And so I just started having conversations. This was before I became a certified coach. In fact, it led to that. I started having conversations with my students, and they might come to me to about a paper that they had written, or the property exam, or my one of my clinic students about a case. But then I just started saying, "So how are you doing? You know, just talk to me. How are you doing?" And no one was asking that question, "How are you?" in law school. It was just do this, do this. How are you? And I started hearing these stories. And so I just started trying to give them some of the advice that had helped me throughout my journey. And one day, after an hour conversation with a student, and this was right before the pandemic, a student called me. I think it was one of my clinic students who had my number because they were one of my clinic students. And and was upset about something. And I got off the phone and I said to my husband, I should be a wellness coach. Is that a thing? And then the pandemic hit and I actually had time to do this. And that gave me some structure to be able to help my students. And it actually helped me to build this program, the Well Law program. So long story short, that is how I got there. In the meantime, I also had become a yoga teacher. And so that just became a bigger and bigger part of what I was doing until finally I knew that this was the path that I needed to follow.
Oh, what a wonderful story. I feel the same way. My students will say, you should be like a therapist, you should be a coach, and you should be this. And I'm like, here's what's important for you to know. I'm not a therapist, right? And so if you enjoy speaking to me about these issues and problem solving, then therapy will be a great path for you to explore. I had to remind them that because what they really were trying to do was come back to me for therapy.
Yeah.
And I had to be careful about, listen, I'm here to be a stopgap. Like you said, just ask, how are you? I remember I heard from someone who was pretty high up in the military, one of my leadership programs, and he started that program within his command. Just have people ask, how are you? If you notice someone's a little off, and if you haven't said that to anyone and no one has asked you in a while, then we know we need to go start doing it some more because no one's doing it. And that is how students and lawyers are falling through the cracks, especially when it comes to their well-being. And some of them can be helped if someone just intervenes just a little early to help them notice, right? That kind of noticing. But before we go into all these great tips, I noticed some interesting things. I'm sure our listeners are wondering the same thing. You were at Kansas and Washburn, and now you're in the Netherlands. You said you taught property and clinic. Talk to us a little more about what the beginning of your legal career looked
Mhm.
like, because you jumped from being a child to being anxious to being a law student anxious and then a law professor. And we're sure there's some interesting things in between, just so people can relate. Because you said property, which is has to be one of the hardest courses in law school when you first start because it is so abstract, right? So I'm sure you were dealing with a lot of students who were freaking out.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I started my legal career after law school. I practiced law for 6 years, civil litigation, and first with a very large firm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and then with a smaller communications firm in Washington, D.C. Then I really just felt that I needed to do something that for me felt more meaningful in my life. And so I ran a nonprofit organization for 8 years in Washington, D.C., helping the homeless population. And during that time, during the last few years that I was there, I started teaching adjunct at the University of the District of Columbia Law School. And I was teaching race in the law. And I thought, oh my gosh, I love this. I love being with the students. And I just knew this is what I need to be doing. So I went on the market and I got a tenure track position. And that's how I ended up in Kansas, in Topeka, Kansas at Washburn Law School. And I was there for 18 years. During that time that I was there, several years before I retired, I my family wanted to do a year. We've always wanted to do a year abroad. My husband and I have one daughter. And So we came to the Netherlands for that year. I had taught a summer program in the Netherlands before, years before, so I was familiar with the country. So I was a guest professor at the University of Groningen here. And I had a great experience. We went back to the United States, and that's when the pandemic hit. And our daughter said she started high school pretty much in her bedroom. She started in the school, and then it was on her screen. And after 2 years of that, she said, I really want to go back to the Netherlands and finish high school with my friends there. And I had the opportunity to be able to teach remotely. At the time, I was leading an externship program, a novel program that Washburn started called Third Year Anywhere. And so the students could be placed in with legal employment any place in the country, indeed any place in the world. And I was their teacher for their seminar and their faculty supervisor. And I was the liaison with their work supervisor. So I was doing this work, and I was clearly able to do that anywhere because I had students from Seattle, Washington to Florida. And and I was also teaching clinics, still teaching my clinic course. And I decided, since basically, long story short, my daughter decided she wanted to stay here and go to university here, I thought I really need to stop the two full-time jobs. And so I retired from Washburn after 18 years and received emeritus status. And because of the work that I was doing here as a guest professor, they asked me to fill this position of Wellbeing, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer because I was giving so many presentations on this, and they really were committed to it on this faculty. And on a part-time basis, I do work here, and the rest of my time is with my Well Law program and my other coaching program outside of the law in the United States.
That's a great background. And I love that you've done civil litigation, which is what most lawyers do, right?
Mhm.
So when you're giving these tips, it's not coming from an academic point of view, it's coming from
Right.
your lived experience.
That's
That's really
absolutely right.
important. Yeah, because a lot of people who haven't had this experience, what's the big deal? They don't get it. They don't get billable hours and the amount of anxiety that is weaved into it. They don't get lawyers who are basically your supervisor because they've lasted but they don't learn supervisory skills. So now that creates more stress. But then you've also dealt with law students and watched them transition, especially through clinic work. And I love that Third Year Anywhere. That's such a great name and
It's a
concept.
great program, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you've seen it from all sides and experienced it yourself. So I just wanted to lay that groundwork so that our listeners understand this is coming from lived experience, from clinical background, from research, from actually helping people day to day. And it just gives it a lot more weight and heft, and they're more likely to try it out. Because I know lawyers are skeptical.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're
We are a
trained to be. Yeah.
exactly, we're a skeptical bunch. So now with that background in mind, let's start talking about the significance of professional integrity and community outreach for new and young lawyers. Because, and I always tell law students, especially third year, I'm like, you don't know anything about practicing law yet. You know how to think like a lawyer, write like a lawyer, speak like a lawyer, but you don't actually know how to practice law yet. And they're always shocked or offended. It's okay, you'll find out in your first year. But then they're so focused on trying to figure out how to practice law, they forget this other stuff here.
Yeah.
So what is the relevance of all this to our practice?
I like to start with even the preamble to the rules of professional conduct. And the preamble actually touches on professional integrity and says, a lawyer's conduct should conform to the requirements of the law, both in professional service to clients and in the lawyer's business and personal affairs. So it's not just how I conduct myself at work, it's how I conduct myself personally. And even though they don't use the words personal integrity, that really is what we're talking about. So the underpinning, the underpinning and foundation of the rules of professional conduct, that is our guidebook, that's what we're mandated to follow, starts with this idea, this concept of professional and personal integrity.
It does. And we know when your personal life falls apart, it will impact your professional life.